Last week I talked about how two of the most commonly used manuals had similar criteria for an autism diagnosis. This week I'm going to break down some of the traits as well as give perspective as to why autistics have these traits, coming up on Autistic with the chance of weather. Welcome back to another episode of Autistic with a Chance of Weather, my weekly video blog on my life as an autistic meteorologist. I'm JP, your host. This week I am continuing the theme this April of autism acceptance/awareness this month by breaking down what autism is as well as explaining why there has been fighting on social media for it to give a balanced perspective to help my fellow autistics understand parents and the parents of autistics to understand why autistics feel a certain way. Last week I talked about the traits briefly by the two categories, the social interaction and the sensory aspect. So I'm going to look at each one better as there are components in the social interaction that depends on the sensory traits. Let's look at the sensory traits in depth to start. The first trait I'm going to talk about is special interest, or SPINs, as autistics call it. Why do autistics have SPIN? Like most people, we all have interests or hobbies. However, for autistics, we go deeper than other people into the hobbies for a number of reasons, like it gives us energy or builds up our dopamine and we like it also, that by going deeper into it, like the history of the Yankees or the statistics of the Yankees lineup would give me more energy the more I delve into it. SPINs can also have a calming or soothing effect, especially if we are being overwhelmed by sensory input or are tired from a day of school or in a situation that uses a lot of energy. The second trait is the hyper under sensitivity to sensory input. Autistics can be overwhelmed or underwhelmed by sensory input, and that can lead into some of us going into our SPINs as well as cause us to stim, which I will go into detail soon. I am sure we all have dealt with our computers running slow at some time or often, and that is kind of like what autistics go through when being overloaded with sensory input. Like, if I have Python code running to do machine learning, my Chrome browser running, as well as editing and rendering my latest video, my computer would lag and act up because of all these apps using a lot of memory, which is what it is like when autistics are overwhelmed by sensory needs. It is not the computer being broken, but rather it is being overwhelmed at the moment. However, on the flip side, the hypersensitivity to sensory input can be compared to drinking water is not receiving enough sensory input. Is like drinking only 8 ounces of whatever you need to go biking or to class. The third trait is stimming. You would probably recognize stimming on a daily basis, such as walking back and forth or doing things with your hands like that, or dancing. Stimming also includes echolalia, which is repeating words. According to the manuals, lining up things by color and other such traits fall into the stimming category. Many autistics will tell you that stimming helps bring a balance of regulating the senses, so some might also describe it like I do as a way to show your emotions, so to burn off the excess energy like I also do. Almost everyone can stim, like biting your nails is a stim, but for autistics, they stand out more and draw off the attention as it is unlike others. However, autistics who stim should be allowed to stim as it is a way of regulating, so if we stim, let us stim. The final trait is the sameness in routines. People often think that autistics are inflexible and selfish by having routines. However, we often have routines as a way to regulate how much energy we use in a day as well as time to recharge. Many autistics might seem inflexible, but in reality, the change in schedule often leads to using more energy than budgeted. Also, the sameness like having a crunchy PB&J sandwich and not liking the smooth peanut butter can also be tied to the sensory input, as the same thing produces the same amount of energy, which we factor in. While changing it could reduce the energy the autistic person has. These four traits connect to each other at different times, like someone could be flapping their hands as a way to regulate themselves because they are being overwhelmed by the loud music, or as a way to show excitement when watching the lightsaber duel between Darth Vader and Luke in Return of the Jedi. However, some of these same traits also have a factor into social communication traits. The first social communication trait is conversational, like starting a conversation, keeping it going back and forth, and the showing of interest. The maintenance of conversation is on the list, as autistics use a lot of energy in the conversation and may be drained easily, especially when talking about things. And most autistics want to get to the point, but some autistics confuse non-autistics by weaving in different details, which often confuse the non-autistics, as it is like flying from San Francisco to Atlanta to Detroit to New York instead of directionally from San Francisco to New York. The second social interaction trait is the nonverbal language, like body language, eye contact, and gestures. Autistics like myself often struggle with this, not because we want to give the one impression, but is because of the energy required, like the first piece of that conversation. In addition, first eye contact can make some autistics more anxious, as well as the eye contact can also be distracted based on the sensory outputs, like something's distracting me from keeping my eye looking straight at somebody when talking, like the lighting is too dark or it is too bright or something. Another component to keep in mind is that autistics also struggle with the non-verbal body language and gestures mostly because of comorbidities such as epilepsy or dyspraxia. I myself have dyspraxia, and when I was younger, I did not have as much control of my body. Like, I would be standing too close to someone. Instead of thinking that we don't care through our body language, there are other factors that make us appear like it, so keep that in mind as we are listening to you. The final social interaction piece is making and maintaining relationships. Starting and maintaining relationships, whether they be with coworkers, classmates, and possible dates, can be very taxing on the energy of autistics. In addition to the energy, the communication differences of autistics also is a factor, especially if the autistic person is a non-speaker. However, the relationship aspect to autism is a two-way street, as non-autistics play a factor into it. For example, someone at work might think I am crazy when I am stimming without talking to me and letting me take my time to communicate in a way that why I am stimming. Another example would be that a classmate would invite Billy to a party, and the classmate explains to Billy that there will be a lot of music and food, but Billy says no because he is very sensitive to sound and as well as having food allergies. So the classmate ignores Billy without letting Billy being able to explain if he can why he can't go. Spins also play a factor into the relationships, like it is easier to talk about the same topic like baseball with someone who likes baseball and grow a friendship out of it. But building relationships on other areas would require patience and more energy. And those are the traits more in depth that are part of the autism diagnosis. You may have noticed that I did say a lot of it is based on entry and sensory regulation, as many autistics describe the traits as based on how much energy they have. The best way to know what you can do to accommodate any autistic is to let them explain what they need in a way they can communicate easily without too much energy being used. Next week, I will talk about the comorbidities that are common among autistics and how they play a factor into the traits. I also would like to ask you to help share my videos and channel to help me get to 1,000 subscribers. Thanks, and I'll see you next week on Autistic with a Chance of Weather.